Australia, and he will talk to us about biofluid-induced lung injury. Gianluigi.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for inviting me for this talk. And these are my conflict of interest, and none of these conflict is specifically related to this presentation. Now, I would like to start with this picture, because when we deal with very important and highly severe diseases like ARDS, it's always a good suggestion to learn from the expert. And everybody knows these two people here that they published something very interesting a few years back. The assumption was not all the ARDS patients have this homogeneous inflammation at time zero when they come to our emergency department. Many of them could have just compartmentalized or just a low level of inflammation that then throughout the hours, so throughout the period of mechanical ventilation can spread out and create something more severe. And in terms of the pathophysiology, we know very well that as soon as the ARDS patients are ventilated, they are at risk if we don't use the right setting of ventilator-induced lung injury. What we don't know is when they develop the exudative phase and they are filled with this protein-rich fluid edema in the alveoli and respiratory airways, if this can be spread through, for instance, mechanical ventilation, and then create something that it could be called biofluid-induced lung injury, because we know from a lot of studies in the early 90s where they analyze BAL fluids from this patient with the ARDS, then these fluids are absolutely filled with inflammatory markers, and this is consistent in all the study. When I look at the literature in order to find if there is any evidence of installation of cytokines derived from ARDS fluid and injury, there is nothing out there. And for instance, this is a study in mice where they use purified chemokines in the lungs of mice, and they found that they could replicate injury. But what about propagation? This is a study from Sereda from Pittsburgh, where they looked at the propagation of injury in animals. And the original injury was with hydrochloric acid intravitreal installation, and they found two completely different phenotypes. Some animals, irrespective of the setting of the ventilator, they had this centrifugal propagation of injury from the middle part of the lungs toward something very similar to ARDS. Some others, even with the same ventilatory setting, they didn't have any propagation. It was contained, the inflammation. And when they look at risk factors, the only thing they found was an association between the original lung strain at the beginning and the propagation of injury. So now, in these other animals, they just use injurious mechanical ventilation. And instead of this centrifugal propagation of injury, there was a centripetal propagation of injury. And we don't know why. The most important question, is inflammation homogeneous in ARDS patient? A very important study by Pesentis group found that in approximately 50% of the patient, you have just injury where the lungs are collapsed. Then there is a 30% that is a little bit more widespread, but then there is another 20% where inflammation is a little lower. Looking at this data 10 years after, what about the risk of propagation in this patient where everything is contained, or lower risk of propagation where the inflammation is absolutely diffuse? And in line with the Calvi ideas of endotypes, maybe there is an endotype that has a low inflammation and low risk of biofluids inflammation. Of course, this is a study after 5 days of mechanical ventilation and diagnosis of ARDS. So we don't know in the early phase of ARDS. Do patients with ARDS have a lot of fluids? If you go to an ICU worldwide and you look at the endotracheal tube, this is patient in prone position. This is what coming out from these patients throughout the mechanical ventilation. So they do have a lot of secretion. So before leaving Barcelona, we did some study on models of ARDS. And we use a model of lung lavage and injurious ventilation. This is a model from Amato's group. And we know from this model that injury is absolutely consistent and inflammation is consistent throughout the days. So we took some fluids from these pigs and we instilled fluid in the right medium lobe. Instead, in the right lower lobe, we just instilled the saline. What we found after 72 hours, these are absolutely preliminary data. What we found was that, you see here the hyaline membrane, this is from animal with ARDS. These are animals that are supposed to be healthy, but after instillation of ARDS fluids, you have something very similar to the early phase of ARDS. And when you still, in the same method, just saline, you just have healthy lungs. In Brisbane, in the lab in Brisbane, given that the assumption that you have a different production of biofluids in the two endotypes, we tried to create two endotypes of ARDS. One with just oleic acid and another one with oleic acid and LPS infusion. You see, in the blue part of the graph, when you instill also LPS, you have a very severe PO2 FiO2 ratio, and this is consistent throughout the hours. And when you look at inflammatory markers, these are inflammatory markers systemically. You have something very similar to the Calvi endotype model, where there is an increase in inflammatory markers in the animals that they have both oleic acid and LPS. What do we know about propagation? This is the last few slides of this, and this is just assumption, because at this moment no one has studied biofluid and propagation of biofluids. We know from very early studies from Sackler group how you can move secretion within the airways. In particular, some of the most important factors are, of course, gas density, airflow velocity, and fluid viscosity of these biofluids. In Barcelona, we studied the animals, so mechanical ventilation, and we were interested in the semi-recumbent position and the inspiratory flow. You know that when you modify the duty cycle in your ventilator, you are able to reduce the inspiratory flow. And this is what we did. So we tried to prolong the inspiratory time in order to reduce the inspiratory flow. And what we found was that during inverse ratio ventilation, all these fluids were moving toward the glottis. Instead, when we had a standard setting, as in the mechanical ventilation worldwide, all these fluids were moving toward the lungs. What about the recruitment maneuver? This is a very recent study. When we look at recruitment maneuver, look at this data. This is mucus moving toward the lungs or toward the glottis. This is a baseline, and when you do in any of the recruitment maneuver, secretion are moving toward the lungs. This is positioning as well. These are fluoroscopic images of a ship positioning in the semi-recumbent position. This is the tip of the endotracheal tube, and here there are the lungs. Look at the fluids how just by gravity are moving toward the lungs. So now, in order to demonstrate something clear about biofluids and potential injury, the challenges are very high. In particular, we need to comprehensively evaluate inflammatory body fluid. We need to perhaps even look at biofluid in the two endotypes of ARDS, characterize regional inflammation, and most important, to have a temporal and causative correlation between inflammation, spread of inflammation, and injury. This is not easy task, in particular because we don't have methods at this moment in order to measure biofluids at the bedside. We can measure lung ventilation at the bedside with electrical impedance tomography. We can measure inflammation, but even lung perfusion from Amato's group, but no methods in order to measure at the bedside. You could transfer your patient to nuclear medicine department, but this is not ideal in a patient with ARDS. So, in order, this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to create something that at the bedside can measure propagation of biofluid, because at this moment there are no methods. This is a collaboration between, of course, the Critical Care Research Group in Queensland, at the University of Queensland, and you know another familiar face, Amato, that has a great expertise in lung imaging. And these are the labs where we are doing this study. So in terms of, we don't know yet what if this is going to open a new field of investigation. But certainly it's something that is, we believe is worth it to at least study in the future. No? Thank you very much for your attention.